side on the what do we call it, interaction space, we have interaction designer, and then a little bit smaller scope would be UI designer, and then a little bit bigger scope would be UX designer. And then product designer will actually be touching all of those quadrants in a certain way. Researcher obviously would live on the research space. UX writer, again, somewhere in the middle. Design manager majorly lives on the operational side of things, and the UX strategist lives usually between the analysis and operations. And then there is a product manager who, again, does not touch really the interaction side of things, the prototyping part, but lives a lot on the analysis, research, and operationalizing side of things. So we have multiple roles, and they all map out on this quadrant. And you can kind of start seeing the patterns and imagine what different roles could correlate with different responsibilities. Now, let's talk about how could it be relevant to you and how you can figure out which quadrant you want to target first. And so I'm going to start from like a little preview, right? Basically, some time ago, Swiss psychiatrist Carl Jung, he's the founder of analytical psychology. He kind of proposed this concept of introversion and extroversion, as well as 4 functions of how we think or how we take information, process information. So he suggested that we as human beings, we usually express ourselves through introversion, extroversion, or different types of information taking, be it sensing, intuition, thinking type, and then perceiving type, right? And so some people could argue, and honestly, it's actually still a speculation, so don't take it as like a set in stone sort of science, but there's a lot of speculation around this approach in psychology. However, based on this study, or I guess suggestion that Carl Jung did, later on there was developed a very popular testing, which is called 16 personality test. I guess some of you might have heard about it or took it even. Maybe some of you even know your character from that test, right? And so we will talk about different mapping of 16 personality test could help you with identifying your roles in this design industry. So this hypothetical 16 personalities kind of mapping test could help you identify the speciality. But like I said already, please take it with a grain of salt, because it's just a speculation, and it might help you with the direction. It might help you identifying maybe the things that, if you feel like relevant to you, could help you out with identifying your role. But at the same time, you still have to reflect or ask people around yourself about your strong sides to kind of see yourself better. What's your initial direction? So 16 personality tests, right? We have different types of, let's say, groups of people or personas there, right? We have introverted, extroverted, and we have extroverted intuition, introverted thinking, extroverted would fit for research spot, right? Research quadrant. So we would call them detail spotting researchers. And then extroverted sensing, those people would be usually very well seated at the design evangelist stage, right? So these would be great PMs, product managers usually. Introverted intuition would probably be a great fit in the prototyping or so call them feature explorer. And then there is extroverted intuition, which would be a little bit more high level, right? We would call them ideators, because they would be still good at prototyping, at interaction design, but they would also be more generalists, and they would touch better all those other aspects. So maybe they would be great at product design. And then so far goes on, right? So introverted thinking would be potentially great quantitative analysts, whereas extroverted thinking, those people would potentially be better at methodology, metrics, ambassadors, and we will talk about details there in the next couple of slides. Introverted feelings also would be great user and ethics advocates. So those are the people who would be really strong in, for example, accessibility and empathy and stuff like that. And then extroverted feelings, those are the people who might live sort of in between of be great workshop wizards. Now, let's talk about each of them one by one and kind of break down about just general qualities that each of those personality types could indicate. Again, please take it with a grain of salt. It's still a speculation, but I hope it could give you a sense of direction, and maybe it could also identify if you're matching with it as well. So the first type would be introverted sensing. So this guy of detector, right? Somebody who would be perfectly fit at the UX research space. So this type of person would usually be very oriented and focused on the details. They would be very observant and have a good memory. And usually these observations would be well processed in the reliable reports. And of course, that makes them great researchers. Sometimes those people could be also great designers, those like perfect UI designers, because they will be very detail oriented, and that means that they could be pixel perfect designers. However, because they're introverted, they would usually prefer working alone, so maybe remote companies is a better option for these kind of designers. Now let's talk about extroverted sensing. Hello, it's my type usually. So these people would be usually better at design evangelizing, right? Those people would live a lot on the analysis space, on operationalizing side of things. And usually these people with this thinking understand the group of people around them that makes them great workshop facilitators or keynote speakers or even product manager, because again, it means orchestrating the complexity, the relationships, the people, the data and stuff like that. Because they're a little bit of these high-level thinkers, they could be and they are usually also good at recognizing patterns and trends. So that's about right? We're talking about kind of facilitators, let's call them so. And then feature explorers. So they would live strongly on the interaction side of things, this quadrant, and they usually are, because they're introverted, would be into books and games, which would fit into the imagination, which would fit into being really reflexive thinker. So yeah, these people usually are really good kind of in-depth thinkers. At the same time, they could be a little bit of the and the opposite side, we have extroverted intuition. Those are the ideators. So it's a little bit of a scale up. Introverted intuition are big picture thinkers, as opposed to the introverted intuition are diving into less deeply, right? So introverted would be very deep in the subject, whereas extroverted intuition would be more holistic, high level, diving into multiple subjects, but less deep, obviously more like surface level. Natural ideators, so they like to connect the dots, make high-level concepts, come up with ideas, just again high-level general ideas, concept, but not right? Not so good with pixel perfection, small interactions, details such as, I don't know, navigation, transitions and stuff like that. So they would be a great match working with, for example, sensing and thinking designers who are usually much better with design details. And obviously extroverted intuition, because they're high-level pictures, they would good, and they are also connecting the dots usually, so they would be good and low fidelity kind of conceptualizing. Like, it's an interesting perspective. Again, we usually don't think about it in the product design space a lot, especially in the in the design teams, that different ways, and it's very good to figure out what kind of thinkers you have, match them with those people who who complement each other. For example, like if you are extroverted intuition designer and you are always coming up with great concepts, innovation ideas, maybe you're not so good with details. Maybe it would be great to figure out who is a designer in your team who could be at the working on concept and really come up with a very holistic approach to the solution. Now we have also introverted thinker. Those would be quantitative analysts. They use the research side, but at the same time, they're great as a quantitative analyst, essentially. So they usually, this type of people like to understand statistics, and that makes them great at producing data analyses and as well as reports. But that obviously means that they are not so good in the lower part of the quadrant. So maybe they are not so good at empathy and creativity, right? Those are not the key strengths. A little bit more and focusing on methodology and basically those people are usually more confident and more so they like to lead. They usually strive towards efficiency. They could excel at the service design when you have to understand the systems, again, holistic systems. People, right? Again, being extroverted, more to you can involve more people, analyze complex systems in a clear mapping for everyone. And usually we can say that those people take the authority in the company to the next level by advocating for design, by breaking the complex into simplicity, and convince the team or generally leadership to invest in design more. Okay, we're almost there. It's kind of a lot of details, nerdy details and complexity. However, we're gonna wrap this part.
So introverted feelings, those are the people who usually
So now we're talking switch between thinking, right? Thinking, feeling. Now we're talking about feeling. So usually those designers are user advocates. This is a very, very common type of designers. These are the designers who are very sensitive. They care about the emotions of others. They usually strong empathy for minorities, which makes them great advocates for accessibility in any product design team. Because they like to understand, because they're actually more empathetic, and that makes them great conflict resolutioners or managers, because they can understand point of views from different sides, conflicting sides, help with coming up with some sort of compromise or best solution. They could be on the opposite side. They could be self-critical and sometimes overthinking stuff.
Yeah, basically, these kind of people are really great designers because in any team you would kind of really people to help you with any complexity or kind of critical situation. And finally, we have extroverted feeling
designers, which could be also people would live sort of in the middle of all those quadrants. We're talking about extroverted feelers, understand the group and dynamics very well, which makes them great team players and collaborators. Facilitators, or maybe focus group facilitator. It could help them becoming a lead in the team and be kind of really outspoken and great at expressing themselves. But on the opposite side, be people pleasurers, which makes it hard for them to make hard and tough decisions when it's needed. So let's see. I'm gonna go throw back again so you can sort of maybe make a picture or remember for yourselves. We have 16 personalities, right? We are dividing them by extrovercy and introversion and different type of thinking, thinking and feeling. And depending on your personality type, you can sort of use it as a direction and kind of reflect whether it makes sense to you and whether the skills you have or natural talents and thinking type could help you with one of those areas or directions. All right, now we're gonna go for and we're talking about how do you get right in this industry and with so many different complex directions. Now, obviously, there are multiple ways to study design today. University, but also it's important that you try out different things, right? So you have boot camps, you have podcasts, you have mentoring, you have projects, you have books, you like hackathons, channels, internships, etc., etc. Multiple data and of searching for answers. Now, which one is your recipe? The truth there is no recipe, right? There is no one size fits all guide or path or workbook that you can just take, read, or know, and then it will help you coming up to the success, right? Even the success is abstract and subjective thing, right? So it's a puzzle game from multiple channels you can use in order to pave your way. No one will tell you what you should do. However, mentors, experience in the industry could always help you with the direction leading you towards your path. However, there are a couple of aspects that you can take into consideration when you are figuring out your path.
What's your learning style? Second is what's your tangible goal?
Another two aspects is timeline and budget, so resources, right? So when it comes to learning, to reflect on what's the most engaging way for you to learn. And there could be multiple answers. You can benefit a lot from, maybe if you're a more introverted thinker, maybe books is the better option. Maybe on the opposite side, if you're more extroverted, you are more reliant onto like working with the group, and maybe boot camps or universities is actually a better way for you, right? Then tangible goal. What kind of career do you want to target, and in what timeline, and with what type of budget? You need to know where do you target. Without knowing where you target, you cannot kind of. Those are the aspects you really need to answer for yourself in a recipe. The recipes could really vary and look very. Some people want to work in design agencies, for example, switching. They're working with multiple clients, multiple challenges, and that would kind of make them feel better and learn. Those maybe design better from courses or redesigning existing business 6 months before they find their first job or internship or whatever.
Let's say a smaller budget. On the opposite side, you can have you can target being a freelancer, and maybe you're more interested in taking courses and redesigning small medium businesses, and you have a smaller timeline and you have a bigger budget. So
again, those are connected. And again, maybe you're interested in a product company. Very different dynamic as well, because product company goes in depth in one industry, in one sort of problem set of
agencies and freelancing.
We're talking about
very high level, like different problems, different industries.
So again, recipes are different for everyone. It's the first step for you is to figure out where do you target and what resources. So style, how much time you have, and what's your budget for that. However, before picking even any educational resource and kind of coming up with your own, there are a couple of things I really suggest you to do. And the first being is generating authentic motivation. And in this class, so it should be already a really easy thing for you. But I always recommend to start out by trying out bite-sized exercises, right? So things such as going to participate in the service design jams, or I don't know, taking any challenges, or even looking for videos online in the life of a designer to see if that's something that fits you. And also, it's also very important that you start from the honest answer for yourself. Why is it the industry for you? Why do you feel like it's the best choice for you in terms of the industry? And that's only the question to yourself. Nobody else could answer, and you can map wise question exercise when you try to break it down and see really what's the authentic motivation for you in this industry. Why is it for you, right? Now, defining your track, and I've just briefly touched it already in the previous slide. So there are multiple tracks that you can take, and this is a very, very high level sort of mapping. Again, don't think about it as like ultimate direction, but it's just to give you some sense of the industry, right? You can be a freelancer, design agency, or product company. You can also be a consultant, and there are multiple other segmentation. But talking about freelancer, we're talking when the designer is kind of jack of all trades. You not only need to well, but you also have to be a great salesperson, right? You have to be a great manager. You have to be great at what you do as designer. You also have to be, right? There's multiple skills you're developing if you are choosing this track. As a designer, you on your craft, but again, you're switching the hats from different industries depending on the client project. So it is, again, you're building multiple high-level knowledges about different industries while still practicing design skill and craft and focusing on that. And in the product company, again, you're building a strong sort of depth of knowledge in one. You usually work a lot with business needs. You understand the business goals, KPIs, metrics, and then you start applying it to the design thinking and working with users and ideating and coming up with creative solutions, right? So very different ways of applying design. And you kind of have to figure out for yourself what is your interest. What are the kind of applications fit best at, or at least you would be more interested or excited about. Also, the maturity really would depend. It's a very subjective thing right now, but it is dependent on the type of design agency you work at. In the market today, design agencies used to be considered as like this, let's say, what's the perfect name for it? Sort of outsourcing design work, right? Where have their internal design team. So usually the design maturity lower just because outsourcing means specific timeline, specific budget, and the quality is not always the biggest metric here. Whereas the product company tend to be a little bit more mature. However, it also depends on the company growth stage, and it also depends on the company design leadership and stuff like that, right? So product company, just generally, a rule of thumb, tend to be a bit more UX mature because at some company who wants to succeed realizes they need to invest in design. The design ROI is always a big thing. And then finally, assessing your rest. Basically, once you have the goal set up for yourself and you know that targeting, you just need to understand how much time do you want to find job, or what's your actual goal, right? Time you want to get to that kind of goal, you want to achieve that goal. So exercise number 1 for today is to reflect and answer a couple of questions for yourself. First being, how do I first learn best? Second, where do I really want to start working, or sort of what's my goal right now? And then when do I want to start and do it for money? Basically, when do I want to start my professional career? And then at the end, how much resources can I really invest in my education? So these are all questions that will help you identifying your sort of recipe or a learning path. The answer could be something like, I best learn from videos. I always need just taking a lot of theory and reading books, but actually doing it. Maybe I want to work with a freelance clients doing UX and strategy, so I will want to sort of specialize in the area. And I want to fully transition and start working professionally, let's say in 1 year, and I can save 20% from my salary or whatever income to reinvest in my education. And that's basically your fundamental from which you start paving your way. Then, of course, you will always need support and help from different mentors, for example, or outside perspective. However, this is the strong place for you to start from. All right, now, final section for today, and I will talk about my personal story and how it kind of taught me about the key learning components and what are those learning components, right? We kind of I talked about those different skill sets, right? Like storytelling, prototyping, presentation, and stuff like that, right? So what are the components for us to learn these different skills? My story goes like that. I personally had in the design thinking, or it was also called user-centered design. Then to start practice, suddenly went into the hackathon, just very accidentally, didn't plan to do it, but yeah, I was kind of pulled into a hackathon, and boom, I figured it out practically, and kind of a moment to generate authentic motivation when I realized that's a really great thing for me to do. I like collaborating. That's the first time I sort of saw it in practice as the right fit for me. Self-education, a lot of reading, obviously, like we all like to do. And then after finishing being a lot, it was also suddenly because of the hackathons, and I found a lot of clients for the hackathons. So I started receiving kind of client requests, so I started working on different products like that. And
if I decided to start my own again, it was like, all right, I have some business perspective now.
it's interesting. I want to figure it out. I want to feel like designer who can build businesses and understand that perspective. I also had internships in design agencies, and eventually I also started teaching different courses. That's like a little preview on my path, and what it taught me is that if I reverse engineer the components of each of those sort of step I took, you can understand that, okay, we had master degree, hackathon, self-education, freelance, startup, internship, teaching. Each of those could be correlated a lot with one aspect of studying. For example, master degree was a lot of theory. Then hackathon was a lot of practice. The design agency and started working with different people, designers, who started giving me the feedback. And then when I started teaching design, it's when I started reflecting. And reflecting was a very long missing component in my sort of journey, because for a very long time, I felt myself like a complete imposter. Feeling. So while doing theory, practice, and feedback, I kind of knew what I'm doing, but again, I still felt very not confident in myself and what I can help with, until I started reflecting through the classes. And that's the piece of the kind of piece that I was really missing in my journey. Figure out how much I know that I didn't know, right? And I feel like this
in their journey, because
it's not always.
If you think about even design projects, design
as a craft, we always try to do the retrospects in the design world, right? Every time we finish the project, we do the reflect in that project.
And the same goes. It's not enough to just go through the books and theory and
learn the methodology. It's not enough to just practice. You always have feedback from the outside. So the people around you, designers with experience, could help you grow in. But the last thing you really want to do is reflect on what went well, what were your strong sides, and what things may be particularly interested you that you want to dig further in. What are the gaps you have discovered in this project that you kind of want to start working on? This holistic structure from theory, practice, feedback, and reflection will really help you to build the confidence in this design. And like I said already, knowing. Second of all, your path, right? And then going using theory, practice, feedback, and reflection would really help you to sort of be confident, and let's say in 1 year from now, stand out as the candidate once you start searching for a job, or if you already have it. All right, so just to recap, start by reflecting on who you are, or maybe you can use the 16 personality test. Build your own recipe, answering the questions we have discussed earlier. And then finally, execute your learning path with those 4 mentioned components. All right, I feel like this is it. Yeah, this is it for today. Much for listening and for taking your time being here. That would be it. Yeah, questions. I'll probably stop sharing. Great.
So hopefully, hopefully we don't have a feedback here from the microphone, but I think this one should be going okay. So yeah, first of all, to the audience, and then I'll look at some of the other questions that we have here. Now, as you know, you can also use Teams, and Sasha has posted a question in Teams. So I just wanted to see if anyone has a question that they want to raise your hand, or if you rather write it, then go into the Teams channel. And I'll just start with Sasha's question then, if nobody has their hands up right now. Okay, so Sasha wants to know, can you elaborate on what service design is? How does it differ from a UX design role? I think that's a very nice question. Clearly, those are different niches with somewhat overlapping approaches. But I'll let you answer that one, Anfisa.
Yeah, great question. Well, it's like, if you put it simply, UX design is when you particularly focus on business and user. Service, you also focus on organization. So you kind of zoom out and think about the whole system around you as designer. So you're not only talking about the specific touch points of the design, right? For example,
you're focusing on mobile app, I don't know, iOS app.
You build in specific flows. That's a very specific touch point. Mobile app through which people solve their problem. Now, if you zoom out, there is a business ecosystem that kind of needs to, I don't know, get revenue, needs to hire people, that needs to grow as the business and stuff like that. And then there is more high-level perspective when you talk about the systems. So how, for example, your company, I don't know, what kind of department it has. There are different aspects in the whole company, right? There could be front, it's called like front, I can't remember exactly, but it's like front stage and backstage. Yep, that's the word. So front stage is when is touching the user or a customer, and the backstage is all those systems to allow this. Very, very common example would be Uber, where as the user, you just, I don't know, open the app, I don't know, call the taxi, it arrived to the airport. The company, Uber, for example, needs to find riders, needs to organize the system for them as well, needs to have like kind of people operating in that area to work with the business and stuff like that. So there is a lot of layouts that you have understand and map out in the system that everybody is sort of aligned with. That's usually what service designers do. They also solve problems. They also at the same time, they talk about multiple touch points, very high-level picture. They talk about front stage and backstage, and that makes the process much more complicated, usually.
Okay, thank you very much. I have another question online, unless the class has one right now, and if anyone wants to raise their hand. If you have an urgent question right now, otherwise I'll move to the next question that I have online. So thank you very much for this insightful talk. 2 questions. Let's do the first one first. Could you please explain why we're using extroversion and introversion as categories in user analysis? So this is coming from Reza. If you could think about that one.
I think it's just a way for us to understand where we would look. Like, again, it's not like set in stone, and it's in fact, there is a lot of argument around is the false concept, we should not rely on this. Some people are more extroverted in one context and less extroverted in different contexts. So it's definitely still a speculation. However, it's helping us to understand how our, let's say, natural expressions could manifest in different aspects and different designs. If you're more extroverted, most likely you will work better with people, with maybe, I don't know, again, workshop, right? When you have a lot of different people with different hats, different points, trade that group dynamic. And as an extrovert person, more likely you will do it well. Or when you understand the moods and you can always sort of figure out the solution to some conflicts or something like that. And so it's just kind of a way for you to think, am I going to be good in this aspect in design? I would rather be more of the introverted designer who would kind of go in depth, generate great concepts. Usually introverted designers are really great with design, with going in depth and really understanding things, like doing things pixel perfect and coming up with amazing products. There is a disclaimer. It's just a direction that you can consider, but it's like speculative things eventually. I'm sorry.
Cool, thank you very much.
My baby.
Yeah, no, we can hear you. Your
Okay,
video is
good.
freezing sometimes, but I think your audio is perfectly fine.
Right.
Okay, before I go to the next question from Reza, we've got a question from Denise. Am I pronouncing that correctly here? Which is, can you describe a personal experience working with cross-functional teams, including developers and or product managers?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. To be honest, I can speak like for hours about that. Well, how do I put it simply? Let's say, I guess if you're interested in the perspective, for a product could be organized. It's usually defined by design operationalist or design ops, it's called usually. So again, depending on the product type and the product growth stage. And there could be agency style of working, and there could be sort of tribe model for work. The way you collaborate with the rest of the team. Style is when the designer is sort of jumping between projects. Where's the priority? And so they could always work on different multiple projects. Whereas designer who works in a tribe model would always have the same team, manager, the same tech lead, the same set of developers, QA, and stuff like that. It really depends on the company. I work in a tribe model. So we have a product team. We focus on specific touch point in the product. It's the user touching kind of part of the product. We have to work with a lot of data, and we kind of have data analysts who help us with coming up with like insights. So I would work with, PM to come up with the priorities. Then I would work with analysts to analyze the data. Then I would work come up with different ideas and discuss it with a tech lead to evaluate the feasibility of different directions. And then once I start designing, I start talking a lot with developers, again, to tweak different use cases, think about different edge cases, and design for those. So depending on the company, you work in a tribe model, you would really focus on working with one team, and with the team it gets better and better, especially if you do the retrospection.
Okay, thanks so much for sharing that personal experience. I have one more question from Reza here. As an expert in UX, how do you foresee artificial intelligence influencing the future of UX design? Will AI replace UX designers? That's always a good one. Obviously.
Yeah.
Okay, what do you think?
I love this topic. And first of all, I'm not an expert. I'm just like everyone. No matter how many years you spent in the design, there's no expertise. You still grow all the time, and there are different specialities you can build to your toolkit. However, talking about the AI, I am actually loving that it's becoming a part of our work. So if you look into any design tool today, it's still very, very far from replacing us, because design work does not happen on the touch point level, right? Coming up with concepts. It's also leveraging a lot of relationships, understanding the complexity, using different sources of data, working in teams, making the alignment in the teams, right? Working with metrics and business goals. At the moment, AI is very good at and also creativity is a big con of the AI. They are AI is not able to produce creative content. Specific problems that product designers usually solve, it's something that AI is very far from doing at the moment. Instead, what AI is really good at is helping you with directions, with data, with edge cases. So for example, very recently, I was doing one of the design thinking challenge. And as a designer, sometimes, you can come up with some ideas and some mapping of the problems and user needs, but when you need a quick sort of concept, you just, you can't have all the data in front of you. Well, you can use ChatGPT right now to generate multiple edge case persona needs, for example, or something like that, to help you out with things you didn't design. So it's a great, they call it right now co-pilot for your design process at the moment, and I feel like it's moving towards that way right now, at least in design industry. As long as there are people, AI will not be able to solve for people, but it will help you a lot in the process by kind of giving you the data, the relevant data, relevant directions that you could. And yeah, us simplifying the process, and instead of focusing on pixel pushing, it will help us focus on problem solving. So yeah, that's kind of my point of view at the moment.
Okay, perfect. Thank you so much for all the elaborate answers to the many questions that we've received. I think I've checked everywhere right now. that is all the questions that we have. So unless anyone in this class, this is the last chance for today that you have access to Anfisa to ask a question, particularly from someone that has walked the walk that some of you might be interested in walking if you want to become a UX designer. Now is the time. Any other burning questions? Nothing so far. Okay. Well, I think Anfisa, if I encounter any other questions after the talk, I could probably just toss them your way and send you a direct message and follow up. But otherwise, I want to thank you very much for taking the time to join us in class today. That was really nice of you. Thanks so much, everyone, for all of your questions and attending. Thanks, everyone online, for having the patience with our technical difficulties. And that will wrap up the guest lecture section of today's class. So thank you again very much, Anfisa.
Have a good rest of the day. Bye-bye.
Thank you. I will now end the stream.